The job of a product manager is not to sit in their ivory tower or in their corner or wherever they are and make a roadmap and then tell people, this is the roadmap, we're going to go do this thing. Their job is to talk to everybody and figure out what the problems are that they're seeing, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, and ask all the right questions. Their job isn't to have the answers, but to ask those questions and to pull in all the insights that they're hearing and to feed that back into the roadmap. And the roadmap can actually be a really good tool for this. This is why I call the roadmap a prototype for the strategy. So it's a way that you can basically say, here's what I've been hearing. I've been hearing that we've got this problem, this problem, this problem, and this one. So I've laid it out in a roadmap that looks kind of like this. What do you think?
Hey there, welcome back. Before we start, I hope you're having or had a great summer break. I am excited to release the final episodes of Season 1 and also super excited to tell you that we have started recording Season 2 already. Lots of surprises waiting for you, so make sure you subscribe to my newsletter in the show notes so that you don't miss out. And if you enjoy the show, please share it on LinkedIn or with your colleagues. It really helps the podcast and is a great way for you to support my work, which is entirely free. Even better if you can leave a review. I really appreciate that. Now, my guest today is Janna Bastow. Janna is the co-founder of Mind the Product, the world's largest product management community, and CEO and co-founder at ProdPad. I bet you have heard of Janna before, but if not, you have most certainly heard about the framework she invented, the Now, Next, Later roadmap framework. In today's conversation, Janna and I talked about all things roadmaps, of course, why all companies will eventually die, including yours, and the future of product management. So without further ado, I bring you Janna Bastow.
Janna, we are live. Thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Janna, I'm really looking forward for this conversation. You are the CEO and co-founder at ProdPad. You are also a co-founder of Mind the Product, and you are the inventor of the famous framework or mental model. I'm interested to see how you call it, the Now, Next, Later. Is it a framework? Is it a mental model? We'll dig into it. But I'm sure everybody that has done roadmaps before or is thinking about road mapping, they come across the Now, Next, Later framework or mental model at some point. So I'm really interested. Let's start there. How was it for you to invent this, and how did you sort of share it with the community to a point that it's so vastly used across the world?
Yeah, I mean, it came out of myself and my co-founder building the first version of ProdPad, which was digitizing the roadmaps that we were doing at the time. And at the time, we were heading up product at two different companies and trying to build a roadmap tool to help us solve our own problems, which was having to, make the same roadmaps over and over again and need to communicate the work that we were doing. And the first version of ProdPad was a Gantt chart. It was a timeline roadmap. And that's what we thought that our bosses wanted. That's what we thought our team wanted. That's what we thought our customers wanted. Because every time we delivered this one, we showed it to people. They all went, that's great. A little pat on the head and told us to go deliver and actually do the roadmap, do the things on the roadmap. And so set about trying to turn this into, a SaaS product, right? A web app version of it. And it was kind of complicated because this is back in the days of jQuery and Bootstrap, and I was doing the front end code and I didn't really know my way around jQuery, but built the first version of it. And it allowed you to, make ideas in ProdPad, capture ideas in ProdPad, and then take those ideas and drag and drop them onto the roadmap and then stretch them or squeeze them to align to, which day or week they were meant to finish. Kind of a complicated piece of work to show off a timeline roadmap. Started launching it to product people in our network. And our network was pretty good at this time because we had also been working on building the product camp, product tank, Mind the Product network of product people around us. So we started sharing with product people and we started getting feedback. And people loved having this roadmap that they could drag and drop their ideas. But after about a month or so of having this thing, people started coming back to us with this feedback of, hey, I want to be able to take all my ideas, everything in this part, and move it all over by about a month. And had we just built what the customers wanted, I would have, figured out how to do like a multi-select drag and drop function to move everything out of the way on the roadmap. But that was complicated, right? It was already kind of janky and slow and kind of terrible underneath the whole thing. And, I also sort of thought, wait a second, if everyone's moving everything over, there's a whole bunch of things to consider. Like, what if you don't move things over and they fall off the back end of the roadmap and, the timeline marches past you and lots of other things. But also, these are good product managers. I always thought that it was me who couldn't deliver a roadmap. I would make the roadmap and then, time would go flying past me. And I thought that was just my capabilities as a, not quite, perfect product person. Turns out no one was delivering the roadmap, even really great product managers who I looked up to. So if no one's delivering their roadmaps, what is the point of us making these roadmaps? What is the point of making a tool that makes a roadmap that no one's going to deliver? So myself and my co-founder, Simon, we sat at, it was actually in a cafe in South London, near where we both lived. We didn't have an office. This is way before any of that. And we just sat down and sort of went, so what would a roadmap look like if we didn't have this timeline at the top? Instead of a timeline, we instead wanted to think about, what's in front of us and what's after that and what's after that. And, Simon equated it to that cone of uncertainty. The things that are on one side you're more certain about, the things that are on the other side you're less certain about. And so it's kind of like a graph of certain versus uncertain. And we came up with these 3 buckets, which we labeled current, near-term, future. And I recoded the whole thing on the front end just to say, let's have these 3 buckets. And then let's have these higher level initiatives, these cards. And then you can plunk your ideas into those cards and see how that fits. And we weren't even sure if we could still call this thing the roadmap. But at this point in time, we already had a page that said ProdPad is roadmap and idea management software. And it was at, app.prodpad.com/roadmap. So we'd already kind of hard-coded some of this road mapping stuff in there. So it replaced the roadmap with a new roadmap, but it wasn't really what a roadmap was. But we launched it. We put it out there. And by launch, I mean we just sort of let our beta users run with it and use it. Yeah. And they loved it, right? They loved the freedom that it gave them. People were like, oh, this is really cool. So I can show what I'm working on right in front of me. I can show what's coming up after that, and I can show what's coming up after that. I don't have to give any dates on this roadmap unless I want to type the date in and tell people when something's coming. But I only show that level of certainty when I have that level of certainty. So it's a lot more intuitive. Love it. Cool. So we started rolling with it. And eventually we made the titles renameable, because some people wanted to, they wanted to wean their bosses off their roadmap and started changing it to things like Q1, Q2, Q3++. We saw other variations, and one variation came from, it was an early beta user, who changed it to now, next, later. So we didn't invent the term now, next, later. That term existed from decades ago, right? As a concept, a mental model, I guess you might call it, right? But applying it to a road mapping framework in this sort of way was a novel concept. And it was also catchy, right? We're like, right, okay, so this 3-column thing, this is catching on. We were seeing lots of people using it. And as we started realizing, right, we need to call it something. For a while, we were calling it a theme-based roadmap because it was sort of, it was sort of centered around the themes as opposed to the individual ideas. We were calling it a time horizon roadmap. But now, next, later is the one that caught on because it was catchy. Yeah,
I love this story. Thanks for sharing. And also love the fact that it came sort of from a beta user, the naming itself, and then it just, it's like, this is catchy.
It was way more organic than people think, right? We didn't go in with like this discovery going, well, what is a better roadmap? And, let's go and ask 100 product managers and do these iterations. It was way more organic where honestly, we built the wrong roadmap for months and months and months and then had to throw out that code. I had to delete months of code. And that was embarrassing, right? And it really taught us that, you've got to get stuff out there in front of users and start testing in front of them earlier rather than building for your own use cases and then seeing what happens. Even when you are your user, like we were product managers, we were building for ourselves. We didn't have to get out there and talk to our users. Wrong. Like we still had to get out there. And as soon as we started doing that, we learned that lesson. And of course, today, ProdPad is built much, much, much more based on the inputs of our thousands of product people who use it.
Yeah, absolutely. Love it. I also love the little detail, but I'm pretty sure it's a kind of a bigger thing than just the detail. The fact that you allowed yourself to have time to think and go to this coffee shop and just together with your co-founder, and you just think through it, and so instead of, it sounds like you weren't sort of back to back. No, you went to a coffee shop, had a coffee, talk through it, and this time for reflection and thinking. It's also when great ideas sort of.
Well, those were the good old days. I like to laugh. The days before we had paying customers. Right, we had time to really think about what the product could be, and to think about the vision and to think about where we're going. As soon as you've got customers, right, the first few not so hard, but once you've got like your first 100, 200, 1,000 customers, it's like okay, now we've got to figure out what to do with the feedback from the first 100 customers and feedback from the next 1,000 customers, and how that interplays with what our original vision was and everything else. But yeah, I look back very fondly on those early days of us sitting in coffee shops and saying, what is a roadmap? Or sitting in a park going, what is an idea? Should we call it an idea? Or, at one point in time, we nearly called them sparks. That would have been maybe fatefully good or bad or whatever. Should we call them features? No one wants to build a bunch of features. I don't know. Having to figure it out, because ultimately we were building a new category as well. Like we were building product management software before product management software was cool, before anybody was looking this stuff up. And it was a really tough space to be in. It was just as product managers were starting to get a voice, were starting to get a vision, a budget within their team. They were starting to get a space within their team, but certainly not where they are today, where you have product teams and it's obvious that they get product tools. And so ProdPad gets a front seat in that conversation.
Definitely. And it seems that you saw that opportunity ahead of time, almost being one of the first sort of, as you mentioned, really cool software for product people and so on. So how was the process for you? Was it sort of a coincidence that you found this category and explored it and went further to develop this opportunity, or was it a very deliberate decision and you've analyzed different opportunity landscapes and so on? How was it for you?
There's always luck and coincidence and stuff, but like a lot of young entrepreneurs, we were solving the problems right in front of us. I was a junior product manager, and I realized that there were inefficiencies in my job, and so I, started not hacking away, but started creating wireframes and designs for a business that might solve this sort of problem. And I couldn't do anything with it because I only really knew front end and not very much of it. And it wasn't until I met my co-founder, a fellow product person who knew back end, and he's like, oh, this would be easy to build. I could build the back end. That would realize that we could actually do something with this. But at the same time, we knew from the get-go that this could be a really interesting space. So we, from the get-go, decided that we were going to put our heads together and build something that could be really big. Now, at the time, there wasn't really much in the way of models for this sort of thing. And so, one of the companies out there that we idolized was Basecamp. Basecamp had done some really interesting work in the project management space. And so we said, well, we want to do for product management what Basecamp did for project management. And so that, I remember being one of the early inspirations for us. And since then, there's been a lot of other, I think, better, stronger models that we've been able to follow as the SaaS world has grown up around us.
Cool. And I'm glad you've done that work, because you've kind of pushed the industry, as you said, with a massive community, minded product and so on, and you pushed that industry to thinking more about outcomes over outputs. So you basically pushed that movement as well with the Now Next Later. And I want to talk a little bit about that movement, outcomes over outputs, and how the Now Next Later helps you transform to a culture that is more outcome driven. So, but before we dive into that whole transformation conversation, why do you think the project model and outputs and dates and sort of strict timelines, why do you think that's so appealing to a lot of executives and people? Why do you think it's so difficult to move away from that?
Well, I mean, honestly, when you're trying to move away from that, it's like you're taking away their comfort blanket, right? What you're actually doing when you give them this concrete deadline or timeline of all the things that you're going to be delivering, you're absolving them from the bad business decisions that they might have been leading you down, right? So you've got a sales team who's been selling a bunch of stuff that doesn't exist, but you've put down on paper, in concrete, right, at this point in time, that you're going to go deliver this stuff. And so you've basically given them permission to go sell this stuff, and you'll go back it up and go do it. And when you don't do it, you're the one who looks bad. Not them for selling stuff that doesn't exist in the first place. Not them for creating a business model that involves taking away any chance to do discovery in favor of delivery IT project mindset work. It's you as the product manager who looks bad because you couldn't deliver. But ultimately, if the exec there wants the best company, the best return on investment for this company, they need to be able to carve out space. They need to give you space as a product team to do that discovery work, to figure out how you're best going to serve the market in front of you, to do that discovery, to figure out, what does this market need? How are you going to serve it? What problems do you need to solve for the wider market? And not just solve the problems that some salespersons come in and run at you saying, oh, we need to do this one thing. Because ultimately, if you're not taking that time, the chances that you actually solve something compelling enough that's going to allow you to take off in the market and do that swoosh that everyone's hoping you to do are monumentally thin.
Absolutely. Now that there's some people, product operating model, it's a thing now more so kind of more structured with the work from Marty Kagan, pushing that with the new book Transformed, and of course the work from Teresa Torres, Continuous Discovery, and so on. And there's been so many good contributions from so many people trying to move the industry in the right principles or better principles for product development. How do you see that? Some of those principles with the now, next, later. How do you see that? So, for example, to be specific, now do you usually want to see specific things already that we're already confident that we want to build, and then next it's just basically outcomes that we want to solve, and then later is it more like really high level outcomes? How do you envision people to be using this?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on a lot of things about how the team works. But one of my favorite interpretations of the now, next, later roadmap, and again, this comes from how people have been renaming the columns that we see in ProdPad, is instead of now, next, later, doing, discovering, dreaming. So doing is the stuff that's keeping your team busy right now. There's still discovery in there, but oftentimes it's like that last final stretch where you are ensuring that where you're going is in fact the right direction, but you're pretty sure that where you're going is, you're to the right track. But also it's the work following up, right? You're doing the beta testing work, and you're checking that you have actually solved the problem and the outcomes that you've hit are sound. And then the discovering, this is the further field where you're sending the designers off to see, is this in fact the right direction we should be going, right? Let's do some prototypes off in this direction. Let's do some surveys. Let's make sure that what we're lining up for this next column is in fact the right thing to be doing next. We've got more flexibility here, so if it isn't the right thing, we can knock it off and no one gets too angry. And then the dreaming is, here's the problems that we think that we need to solve, right? Here's where we want to get to. These are things that if we tackle these, we can see how it's going to help us reach our vision. But, we're far off now. We're not going to get too detailed about them. These are part of the dream. And so you're much more flexible about these, but you're less likely to be doing active day-to-day work, changing them up.
Absolutely. And who's sort of working with this in your view, Janna? So you're describing, okay, these are the opportunities, or these are the problems that we're dreaming about. These are the things we need more evidence, and we're discovering. These are the things who's having those conversations in your mind? Is it the product leader together with the product team, so the cross-functional product team? Is it just the product team? Is it who should be involved? Is it actually discipline across disciplines? So you bring in sales, marketing, you bring in so many different people to have that conversation. How do you see sort of the I'm trying to avoid the best product teams, but it's like sort of really
I don't shy away from best practice. I mean, I am always an advocate for cross-team collaboration, right? And if you can bring in a wider team, then I'm all for it, right? There's going to be a closer-knit group who has, more direct input in, how things move around directionally within the roadmap, right? Because they're the ones doing the doing and the discovering and that sort of thing, right? But the job of a product manager is not to sit in their ivory tower or in their corner or wherever they are and make a roadmap and then tell people, this is the roadmap, we're going to go do this thing. Their job is to talk to everybody and figure out what the problems are that they're seeing, what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, and ask all the right questions. Their job isn't to have the answers, but to ask those questions and to pull in all the insights that they're hearing and to feed that back into the roadmap. And the roadmap can actually be a really good tool for this. This is why I call the roadmap a prototype for the strategy. So it's a way that you can basically say, here's what I've been hearing. I've been hearing that we've got this problem, this problem, this problem, and this one. So I've laid it out in a roadmap that looks kind of like this. What do you think? And they show it to different people around the team and around the, whoever's part of the stakeholders list. And those stakeholders would give them feedback on it. And some of them might say like, yeah, totally nailed it. Makes sense. Others might say, ooh, but what about this thing that we've forgotten? Or actually, we don't have to worry about that problem because, so-and-so solves it. AI solves it now. And that feedback is going to strengthen the strategy that the roadmap outlines. And so the product manager's job isn't to make a roadmap and then run at it, because it's certainly a weak version of that strategy. Their job is to strengthen the strategy by getting initial insights and then capturing that and then using rounds and rounds and rounds of feedback to capture more and more insights to make sure that strategy has been battle tested, right? That people have had their eyes on it. So when you actually do put a roadmap out there saying, this is the roadmap, no one's like, I've never seen this before. This is a surprise. It shouldn't be a surprise. They should all go, that makes total sense. Like I saw the last iteration last week and yeah, it kind of makes sense. And if I were to talk to somebody else, they could talk me through it as well. Like everyone should have an input on the roadmap or have an idea as to why it's been put together that way. And it's the product manager's job to facilitate the conversations around it. That makes for a really strong strategy and a really aligned team around it as well.
Absolutely. I love that you're saying that. And I love that how you described it, prototyping your strategy and really allowing yourself to get those insights together, navigate, pivot, redo, and so on, and then visualize it for the rest of the organization and bringing in people in that conversation. Do you see... So some people say that if you're using OKRs, you don't need roadmaps. Some people say that you can use both. Some people say, well, use whatever works, right? But for you, there's this. There's three things usually that fly around in your arsenal, basically. So a written narrative for your strategy, OKRs, and if they are, it should be outcome-based OKRs, and then roadmaps. Do you recommend people to play around with these three? Do you think usually like just a roadmap is enough to foster those conversations and sharing those decisions? Or how do you, I guess this depends a lot, but how do you sort of generically speaking see these tools in combination?
Yeah, so a roadmap is basically nothing without some sort of OKRs. And it doesn't have to be OKRs, just some sort of objectives, right? Something to be able to say the why, like what's on your roadmap and why is it there? Even the very first versions of the now, next, later roadmaps on ProdPad allowed you to say, this initiative is on this roadmap because X, and it would have little colored tags that you could associate stuff to. That eventually turned into the full OKRs section as OKRs gained popularity. But basically, the gist of it is that you should be able to connect the work on your roadmap to higher level objectives, the why for the business. Now, one of the reasons why OKRs often fail is that they're used in isolation. Teams think, oh, we don't need a roadmap because we have OKRs. But OKRs without a roadmap doesn't give you anything, right? All you have is a bunch of goals and needles that you need to move. Everyone's like, yeah, we're aligned. We know that we need to go get up that hill. And when we get there, it's all going to be off the charts. Good. Great. Cool. We know what needs to happen. But there's no agreement as to what initiatives are going to happen to get there. As in, we are going to take these actions or do these sorts of things to get there. And that's what a roadmap is, right? They're the steps you're going to take in order to meet your objectives. And so the now, next, later roadmap ties that together. It allows you to say, well, this initiative is happening now, and that's tied to this objective and this key result. So if we do this one first, it's going to help us hit this objective, and then we're going to change goals or change tack, and we're going to go do this one, which is going to help us hit this objective. And then we're going to do this one, which is going to help us hit this objective. So it should tell a story as to how you're going to hit your objectives over the course of the weeks and months and years ahead, tied back to those objectives and those key results.
Nice. I really like the way you described it. And you're basically describing great practices, great habits. What other habits that great product teams that you've observed have
another great habit that I see teams taking advantage of is looking at things in terms of their target outcomes and their actual outcomes. So a lot of people think that the roadmap is only forward facing. Here's what we're going to do. And a lot of teams, they'll have something on the roadmap and they'll go and do some stuff to finish that thing off and launch something, good job. And then they'll just go focus on the next thing, and that thing on the roadmap will just fall off the roadmap. It'll get deleted because it makes room for the next thing that's on the roadmap, right? And that thing that they worked on gets forgotten. It gets launched, maybe there's a release note about it or there's a blog post or whatever, but there's no history as to what got launched and when. And so what we recommend people do is actually collect that into a completed historical roadmap. Here's what we did. So you've got your target outcomes, track your actual outcomes, and track that against, we set it off to do this thing in order to reach this goal. How did we do? We set off to do this thing to reach this goal. How did we do there? And look back in reverse chronological order and look at things that worked and what didn't work. This is one of the key things that we built into ProdPad to be able to allow you to see things that worked and didn't work and really help teams become more outcome focused. Because otherwise, people are saying they're outcome focused by saying, this is the outcome we want, but never actually going back and saying, this is the outcome we got, and here's what we did about it.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
So now, next, later, and as you get done with the now, make sure that you move those things to, okay, this was completed, and these were the outcomes that we wanted to achieve, and have regular touch points during the now to actually measure whether you are moving the needle or not, and to inform the direction forward, right, as well. So I really like that perspective. What else? Is there anything else you've seen? Some of these gems, hidden gems.
And so another one. This is taking a page from Teresa Torres's book, based on a conversation I had with her about. She calls it opportunity solution tree. In ProdPad, we call it initiatives and ideas. But actually, we both think of those solutions or idea level things as experiments. right? Things that you might try in order to solve the problems or meet the the goals or to reach the objectives that you've set out there. And one of the really key things is, she says, don't fall in love with your idea, right? Try lots of things, try multiple things. And so really key thing is having multiple experiments that you outline, right? Multiple ideas on your roadmap. And by experiments, I don't mean, I like the word experiments, because an experiment doesn't mean just having a new feature. A lot of people think about the stuff that they put on the roadmap as, let's build a new feature. And they end up with a whole bunch of new features, which everyone knows doesn't mean necessarily a good product. An experiment could be, let's build a new feature, sure, because that might be one way to solve the problem, but it could be to change a feature or to take a feature away. But it could also be things that aren't feature related at all. It could be, well, let's change the pricing or the packaging, or let's change the way we talk about this on the homepage, like let's change the proposition, or change the process around it, or the terms and conditions, or, anyone on the team could weigh in on one of these experiments that's on the roadmap. So it's not necessarily just stuff that the product team does to keep the development team busy and you're constantly shipping code. It's more about, holistically, what could the team do to help solve the problems that you've outlined for the business?
Absolutely. And I really, when it comes to experiments, I agree. There are some people that think experiments is one thing, and there are people that think it's another thing. I really like the work of David Bland on that, to sort of demonstrate that having a bunch of interviews can be an experiment in a way. You're going into some interviews to test hypotheses, and you have a very written hypothesis, and that's just one tool in your arsenal. Then you can do an A/B test, then you can do a fake landing page, then you can have a lot of different experiments, as you mentioned, to try and track what works and what doesn't, and basically collect the evidence you need to increase the confidence and make evidence-based decisions, basically. So I really like that, and how you could use Now Next Later to also, basically map experiments, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Great. So moving into a different topic, you have, the first time we met, you mentioned that eventually all companies will die anyway, like sooner or later. So let's unpack that a little bit, Janna. Why do you think most or all companies will eventually die? What's your
So this was actually a quote passed to me. It was over beers at the end of the day at it was a product conference, internal conference at a bank. It was the bank had invited me in to do a talk for all the product people. It was about 300 of them, and this is a bank that had survived the economic downturn. As 2008, they got bailed out, so they survived by the skin of their teeth. And this is a company, this is an organization that had been around for like almost 200 years. And so, you thought about it and you're like, this is somewhere that your grandfather's grandfather could have worked at. But looking at how the state of the economy is today, and the state of all these new upstarts coming at these big giant banks and other incumbents, can you imagine this bank being around in 200 years' time? I mean, it's hard to imagine them being around in 20 years' time or 40 years' time. Could your grandchild's grandchild work there? And it's hard to imagine. And this person said, you know what, you're right. Every company will one day die. It's just a matter of when. They'll one day go bust. And, ultimately, it's the job of the people in charge of the business to ensure the longevity of that company and to think about that longer scale vision, the longer scale sustainability for that business. And unfortunately, some companies are stuck in a rut where they're not able to think longer and longer term, right? The business is incentivized to think about the short term vision
Exactly.
for the business, right? This is why you end up with companies making bad decisions for themselves and getting surpassed, right? They're the Blockbuster when they could have been Netflix. I mean, Blockbuster
Exactly.
could have bought Netflix, but passed on it, right? Kodak could have taken over the digital world, and yet they didn't. They slept on it. You see situations like this all the time because basically the crux of the matter is that in order to move to the space where you're growing faster than you are right now, it often takes an investment. And an investment often means that your costs increase because that investment is in your R&D or in other cost centers in your business. And when that happens, your stock prices sometimes go down, and the generally, no one likes seeing the stock prices go down, and that can often mean that the CEO gets the axe, no one gets their Christmas bonuses, and it doesn't incentivize anybody in the higher up areas of the business to do so. And so if they're not incentivized to do so, they're never going to take those leaps, and they're stuck at this local maxima where they're growing, what they think quite happily at sub 1% per year, but they're doing so very predictably, very steadily. You see top companies like Coca-Cola who are happily growing at sub 1% per year, and owning the market. They have a giant war chest to sit upon. But you can imagine that it won't last forever. And there are hundreds of companies like them who are, in dire need of innovating, and yet don't take that move because it would involve having to invest in some sort of new move, probably lose some money for maybe a few quarters, maybe for a few years, maybe for longer, but then see the wins from that afterwards. So they're not willing to take those risks, and therefore other companies are willing to take those risks and come out on top in the end.
That's such an interesting perspective because it's ironic, as you say, that these companies are printing money, and they are the ones that could actually create an amazing system for themselves. An amazing code, bringing the best leaders, the best people to create this amazing culture, kind of dreamy company. They have the cash to do that if they wanted to, but as you say, the incentives are not there because they're already printing money, and most of the leaders are saying, well, we're doing well, we just had the best quarter ever, why change? And so it
why rock the boat?
Exactly. And it makes me think that a very important thing is sort of designing your system to be incredibly adaptable as you go. Because if you manage to create from day one a company that is incredibly adaptable, everything from kind of the more invisible things like culture to the way you organize yourself, like team topologies and so on, like your infrastructure. That's basically probably your only chance to actually prolong for many centuries. I don't know.
But arguably, I mean, what does it mean to design a company from day one? A company, the company design at day one is going to be vastly different than the company design at day 100, day 1,000, day 10,000, day 100,000, right? I mean, look at how Facebook was organized way back when versus how it is today. I mean, there's maybe some vestiges of how it was set up, and you sort of say, oh, you can see, Zuckerberg's culture still seeping through, but there's, that's an exceptional company. First of all, the fact that he's been able to hold on so much control over his own company and still have it to be such a giant company. But generally speaking, it has changed vastly. The way that it works has changed vastly. And most companies change ownership by the time they get to that sort of size. They have to adapt themselves in order to even become such big companies. And so perhaps actually it's healthy having this company turnover. Perhaps it's not good to have a company last forever, right? What does a company look like if it lasts for 500 years, 1,000 years, and actually does find a way to reinvent itself and never get usurped by startups? maybe it is something that's healthy, and we say, actually, let's keep blowing fire under the startups and give them ways to take their place coming up next.
Good point. So it seems that you went on this rabbit hole, and so what are the things that you've thought about? If there's a leader of a big company listening to this conversation right now, thinking, "Oh, hold on, I want my company to last at least 400 more years. What can she do to sort of prevent that to happen? Sort of prevent to some extent from the company to become like a really inadaptable sort of system and so on." What are some of the things you talked about? Incentives? Is it about just changing the incentives and really kind of pushing through and really not caring about stock price and sort of having higher values than that, or what do you think?
I mean, ultimately, if you're going to be thinking long term, you've got to be thinking truly long term, right? And so it's about designing your company OS around what's going to benefit the needs of the company down the line. So it depends, right? Where's the company at now, and what does that look like? If you're a brand new company, honestly, focus on getting through the first 3 years, the first 5 years, the first 15 years, right? If you are at 15 or 20 years, focus on getting through the next 20, right? But there are things that you can start thinking about in terms of, hey, well, how do we make sure that we're not incentivizing people to splash out silly amounts of cash on things that aren't going to benefit us now, but that are actually building us out, the quality staff and training and type of people who are going to stick around for enough time to keep that knowledge in the business, right? What kind of things are going to be important to this? Do we have our ducks in the row so that, if this is something that's going to be here in 50 years' time, we're able to continue that going? What does the economic climate look like in that time? And what kind of technology do we need to get on board with? I imagine AI is going to play an interesting role in that. So what does that look like? There's so many big open questions that I can't even begin to answer. And I'm just reeling stuff off here going, that's what I would be thinking of. I honestly don't know. I'm running a company that's been around for about 10 years, and we're looking at what does the next 10 years look like? And, even that's a hard question to answer. Absolutely.
So let's talk about AI then. And since you've been so immersed in the product community, and you are a very well-known product leader, and people respect you for a lot for what you've done, you have these. So first of all, you are an entrepreneur and a business leader, a CEO, and of a successful company, very successful company, but also you have this product community hat on as well, because you've been around. So
always very busy. Yes.
Yeah, which is good. Lucky us. So what do you think the impact of AI will be for product? And let's talk about two fronts. First, let's discuss how AI will impact the product industry, sort of how we build products, and so the roles and so on, like how we build. And then we can discuss how AI will actually impact the products themselves. So let's start with the first one.
Yeah. I think that we're already seeing this happen, but AI is becoming a really valuable sidekick, right? I think there was this whole thing last year about how AI is going to take over our jobs and how capable it is and that sort of thing. And then people started realizing, well, it's only as good as your latest prompt. And, it is getting better, but honestly, it doesn't solve everything. But what it is really good at, we've discovered, it can take away a lot of our grunt work. And so it's helping us focus on the things that humans are good at and allowing us to get away from some of the repetitive work, which is great. What else would we want our machines to do for us, right? Perfect. Things that we've built it into ProdPad to do. It's like this became immediately popular. Love this one. Things like conjuring up user stories, right? User stories are mind-numbingly dull to write. And what it can help you do is brainstorm user stories, especially if you've written a few. It can help generate and come up with a few extras that you might have forgotten. So you can say, oh yeah, those ones. And you can say that one's out of scope, right? Push it off to the next idea. But basically it helps you come up with those. Or things like, at the beginning or end of the quarter when it's time to write your OKRs for the next quarter, you're probably okay about coming up with objectives, but coming up with those key results. So it can brainstorm key results, right? It can help you figure out, some leading outcome-focused key results. And again, it's brainstorming. It's not replacing you. It's not just doing the work, but it's saying, here's some options for you. Select the ones that you think line up most with what you're trying to do here. And so it's just removing a lot of that busy work and sort of lightening the load on your brain as a product person and allowing you to get back to some of the heavier thinking, which is like, what is it we're actually trying to do here? Let's make sure we're all aligned here. And I think it's stuff like that that's going to continue to take the load off of product people, just small little lifts all over the place. But also, it's great as a sidekick in certain ways. So one of the first use cases we used that for was, so let's say you've got, you've written out your strategy or your vision in ProdPad. We use it to basically be a coach. It'll help you say, or it'll coach you and say, well, this vision, here's ways you might rewrite it to be a bit better, to be a bit stronger. Here's things that might be missing from it. Or this idea you've come up with, it doesn't really align with this vision. I'm not sure why it's on your roadmap. So it can give you that constructive feedback and help you out making better decisions. And so it's actively there, not pressing on you, but just sort of helping you out along the way. And helping you just be like a second brain so that you don't have to have your eyes on everything. It's just flagging things up for you. So stuff like that is going to start. It's already taking the weight off product managers. And as it gets better and better, it'll be able to write more and more of the busy work for you, right? We've got it writing specs and wider chunks of your work now. And it's getting better and better at it. Ideally, I'd like to see product managers to the point where they're just focusing on identifying who it is that they should be talking to, getting in front of those customers and having those conversations, getting in front of their stakeholders and asking the right questions, and bringing those insights in and using AI tools to help consolidate and summarize and do get the right insights out of it, so that they can use that information to make the best decisions on what comes next.
Absolutely, very good points, and I totally agree. And I think you mentioned. For example, when it comes to OKRs and things like that, it will help you brainstorm those. And I think brainstorm is a key word because I still see the value of, you gotta work your way through thinking and reflecting and putting context together and insights and so on, but it will help tremendously doing the administrative stuff, basically, and help you and giving feedback. And so it's basically going in hands. It already is. I'm talking about it in the future, but it already is. Obviously, it's helping you doing these things. And I also think the sort of this PO versus PM, sort of how the Scrum has pushed the role PO and how we see sometimes these roles in some companies as being very sort of administrative, backlog administrators. I do think that AI will basically kill those roles, the need for those roles, as the backlogs administrators, basically. And as you said very well, people will have time to focus on the stuff that matters most: strategic thinking, communication across stakeholders, and use AI to enhance you on becoming a better communicator, like you said, kind of the end of the quarter reports that everyone needs to write. Well, guess what? Now you have an amazing insight dissector with you that follows you along and knows you well, and so it's going to be interesting. How about so on this note, how can product people prepare or sort of upskill themselves to be ahead of the journey, rather than waking up one day in the morning and thinking, oh my God, what's going on? So what can people do?
We're really at the turn of something special, right? And I mean, I'm not going to call it like a singularity or something like that. I don't think there's going to be like some moment where we wake up and something has changed. But we are at the turn of something really, really special. And we're going to look back and say, we were doing some cool work beforehand, and we're doing some really interesting work afterwards as well. So, I mean, be aware of your surroundings, right? Start using the tools. Don't be ignorant of these tools, like don't sleep on GPT. Learn how to use it. Learn how to be a great prompt engineer, or whatever we're calling ourselves these days. Get access to the API for your own tool and figure out novel ways of making use of it, right? Have fun with it. Build something cool and, put it in front of people and see what kind of change you can do, because there is... it's incredible set of tools. It's an incredible upgrade that we've now got access to. The tech has changed, and that's really exciting. So see what you can do with it, right? But also be aware of, what its capabilities are, what its limitations are. Talk openly about it. If you think that there are limitations, share it with fellow product people, share it with the tech community, talk about, why it isn't working, what you think could be done better. Don't kid yourself about it being the perfect solution. I think collectively, us in the product, tech, design, development world have to design the patterns around it that people in the next 20, 30, 50 years will be looking back on going, yeah, this is how we interact with AI. So far, the only thing we seem to agree on is the fact that the purple sparkly button is the button you press for AI magic to happen. So that's cool. We've all settled on that. There's a lot of other things that are going to come, and I'm looking forward to seeing what we make out of all this.
Absolutely. Yeah, another thing that I think is going to be very interesting, or it already is, it's just going to be more and more, is the blend between disciplines like design, engineering, and product, with no code and low code tools, and also with Figma and so on, sort of design tools that before, like 2 years ago, they were used by designers. Now a lot of people can design cool stuff and using libraries and so on. So it's easy for product to sort of quote unquote quote the code, is even though you don't know how to code, right? It's easy for designers to be more involved with product, because using Gen AI to also help you become a better at business as well, and strategy and so on, sort of asking questions that you wouldn't reflect yourself before. So this blend is really interesting as well.
Yeah, the future of product management in AI is going to be really interesting. If with this no code stuff and with this blending of the disciplines, you're going to end up with the ability for people to create products without having to actually work with these other product teams, right? Product management will simply become dictating to a system, right? Basically be picking up your phone saying, hey Siri, I want an app that does this. They probably won't be Siri. Apple seems to be sleeping on the whole AI thing. But it'll be something like that, right? And you'll be able to create an app for an app store or some sort of, app marketplace. And the app will be terrible at first, and there'll be lots of terrible apps, and everyone will be able to create terrible apps in the same way that, mobile phones with their cameras generated, and still do, generate tons and tons of terrible videos. We create more videos than we could possibly ever watch. We'll create more apps, more products than we could ever possibly use. And what we'll probably end up doing is creating apps just for single use or no use, just pointless things.
Yeah.
And just like with videos, just because there's that many videos doesn't mean that they're not valuable. Like the best ones will float to the top. So it'll be interesting to see how we devise systems to figure out which of these apps that are created are actually any good. So there'll be, are we product managers at this point in time? But it'll be a system of almost curation, figuring out, sure, if you can create an app and it costs nothing in terms of, tech effort, making it technically feasible and making it usable, because that's all solved. It can be done with the click of a button or with a voice, right? Command of a voice. It'll be about creating something that's valuable to people. So who decides what's valuable to people? Well, product management becomes more of a curation, and you learn about what's valuable by getting out there and talking to people and understanding your market. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting space, and product management is going to change. It's going to be, when I got into product management close to 20 years ago, it was kind of expected that you had some sort of tech background. I didn't have a CS background or anything like that, and it was a bit weird. It was a bit alienating. It felt like it was a bit limiting. Nowadays, no, you do not need a tech background. 20 years from now, absolutely not. I mean, you're better off having a background in research and ethnographics and, having an ability to just get out there and talk to people, right? And that's going to be more valuable.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Like the whole thing about, so critical thinking is going to be incredibly important because you can't just trust.
Critical thinking never goes amiss.
Right, but it's going to be even more and more and more because all of a sudden
really critical for us in the future.
Critical thinking is going to be critical, No, but seriously, so many people are already on this pattern of like trusting everything they read from chat, for example, and it's like you got to be critical and understand how LLMs work and that there are flaws still, and there will still be, and even though they're going to decrease. So you got to be very critical. You need to be very good at connecting dots. And as you said, the whole skills of doing discovery, talking to people, crafting hypotheses, even though Janna and I could actually help you with that too. But having the understanding, the overall understanding of how these things work and being very skilled at that, like you said, talking to people and understanding discovery well, and being curious and a critical thinker, that's probably going to be really, really key for product management in the future, even more than it is already today.
Yeah, I agree.
But I'm obviously really curious as well to see how all of this pans out. Anyway, Janna, it was such a great conversation. I wish we had a few more hours. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I encourage people to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Let me know where you heard me. Always helps connect those dots. I'm Janna Bastow on LinkedIn. I'm the only one there, so I'm really easy to find. So please stop by, say hi. If you want to check out ProdPad, drop me a line, janna@prodpad.com, or just start your free trial. Give it a try. We've got a sandbox that you can play in as well, prodpad.com/sandbox. We're always encouraging people to give it a try and give feedback because it's a tool made by product people for product people. If you got feedback, send me an email and let me know what you think.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Janna, for joining us. Really
Thanks so much for having me. This is great.
All right, that was it for today. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you subscribe to my newsletter so you don't miss out, and see you next time.